Progressive presents Adjusting to the Suburbs.
I never really thought about tools until I bought a house in the suburbs. It's like this weird homeowner test if I need a tool for a project and don't have it. And my neighbor Ted loves to give me that look when I ask to borrow a pole saw. A year ago, I didn't even know pole saws existed. And now I gotta borrow one from Ted? What is happening?
Anyway, when you save with Progressive by bundling your home and auto, that's the easy part of adjusting to the suburbs. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company coverage provided and serviced by affiliates and third-party insurers.
Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
All right, Joel Byars, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Great. So I'm trying a new format for the podcast here. Hopefully by the time this comes out, I'll have my professional voiceover artist do my intro so I don't have to waste intro time during the podcast. So we're giving it a trial run here. So
I'm honored to be the first, Scott.
Yeah. So I got to say, Joel, I have been living in the Joel Byars universe for the last few weeks here. I mean, you are part of my life now. The Hot Breath podcast, your Trophy Husband special. I think I know who you are now.
That means the world to me. We call it the Joeliverse.
Yeah.
So welcome aboard.
Yeah, I was disappointed. You came to South Bend, which is right by where I live, and actually did a class here a few months ago. And I think I was out of town visiting my grandson or something like that when you were here, and I was disappointed I had to miss that. But I understand you had a really good run at the drop there, so congratulations for that.
Oh, thank you. I had a blast up there. Yeah, we were able to do, I was headlining there all weekend, and I was able to meet up with the club owner, and we did a actual comedy workshop at our house for local comics. So It was a lot of fun.
Some of the guys that were in the class are friends of mine, and they said you did a good job.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. I like to talk to everybody about, first of all, how you got started in comedy. So what was it that got the spark in you to get started?
Well, I actually started second semester of my senior year in college when I realized I had nothing else to lose because Sally Mae took it all. So I decided I'd always wanted to try stand-up, and then I realized, why not? What's the worst that could happen? So I went to a local comedy club, performed in front of about 10 people. Half of those were the staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't kill, but it went well enough to make me want to come back. So I remember people smiling, politely listening, and after that, I was hooked. And I'm sure anyone listening, I know you as well from listening to your podcast, you've got the bug where it is like once you do it once, that's all you want to do.
Yeah, everything seems to be revolving around getting on stage.
Exactly. Yep, that's the bug. Yep.
I'm doing a thing tonight where I introduce myself as a stand-up comic and say that I do have a real job, but I identify as a stand-up comic. So.
We're our own breed for sure.
Yeah. So you've been in this for over 10 years now, and obviously you have produced your own special, which I want to talk about a little bit later. At what point during your career was it okay for you to do comedy, and that was your job?
It took me about maybe 7 years in. I went full time, but the process was very gradual. So first off, when I graduated college, I moved back in with mom. So that was always fun. But I moved back in, got a job at Enterprise, rent a car, and really saved up money that way, and then moved out on my own, and then gradually took lesser paying jobs that freed up my time to pursue comedy. So Enterprise was the most high paying job. And then I went to like dishwashing and waiting tables, and I refilled mini bars at a hotel as well. So I was just doing anything that gave me more flexibility at night to be able to pursue what I knew was going to become my inevitable job, which is stand up. But those early years, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I mean, that grind is working from like 7 to 5, being out at shows all night, and then just repeat over and over and over again, you know, every day. So it was all worth the sacrifice because I knew I just loved it. Even in the hard times, I still loved it. And there was never a moment where I was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing comedy. I just understood this is part of the process and I'm paying my dues. And I still am. 10 years in, I'm not disillusioned to think I have it figured out by any means. I'm learning just as much today as I was on the first day.
One of the things I ask a lot of people is what what their worst experience is doing stand-up. But I wanted to ask you, you've been in it long enough that it would be nice to know when you kind of had that aha moment. So you did the open mic, and obviously you were doing some more stuff after that. When did you just have that moment when you said, oh, this just isn't going to be a hobby for me. This is going to be something I want to do?
Well, really the first time. I mean, the first time I did stand up, I was like, oh, this is what I was born to do.
Okay.
This is exactly it.
Yeah.
But I did a church show a few years in front of like 1,800 people. And that was probably the moment where I was like, oh, because we can grind it out at open mics, and that's necessary. And you should be doing that. But it can become a little sometimes monotonous, or you become a product of that environment. And you're like, is this stand up? Doing comedy at 6 p.m. in front of a window with like homeless people peeing and the barista is grinding coffee beans. Like, is this comedy? So doing that church show was kind of my first introduction to like the potential of comedy, which is entertaining thousands of people. So that was the show that really maybe opened my mind up to the potential of comedy. But my first time doing it, I knew immediately. Like as soon as I got off, I was like, well, this is my life now. For sure.
That's great. And you were just a young guy. You said you were a sophomore?
I was a senior in college.
Oh, a senior in college. Okay.
February 1st, 2010.
Wow. Where'd you go to school?
Maryville College.
Okay.
In Maryville, Tennessee, y'all.
All right. I spend a lot of time in Tennessee and going through Tennessee. My son lives in Huntsville, Alabama, so I have to drive the whole state to get to him.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of jokes about Maryville in my comedy special.
Yeah.
If anyone's interested.
Yeah, it's really funny listening. So the first thing I listened to you was the podcast, and your voice is very broadcaster-ish. And then during the special, you got into a little bit of more of the dialect, the Tennessee dialect, and both of them fit. It's funny that I can see both of them on you, so it's pretty cool how you've been able to talk to the masses and still get back to your old vernacular.
Hey, it's my honky bonics, and that's. My buddy Rob Hayes, who he was actually just on James Corden, but he's been on Fallon and Comedy Central and all this now. But he started here in Atlanta. He was the first guest that we ever had on Hot Breath, and he was the 100th guest as well. But he talks about in the episode 100 how there's different like shades or voices of Joel, where it's like you have podcast Joel, you have stand up Joel, you have like at home Joel. There's just like there's different shades to this.
Yeah, you do well at all of them. I like that.
I appreciate it.
When you were coming up, obviously you're part of the Atlanta scene. There's all these scenes. Everybody I talk to, there's all these scenes, and there's the staples of all of them. When you were coming up, did you have anybody that kind of took you in, mentored you, brought you up, and helped you out?
Probably there's a guy named Rodney Perry who's been doing. He's been on the podcast twice now, but he's a comedy veteran, and he was a guy when you see him out and about that you're like, oh, there's no way he would talk to me, but he would really, and still does, take time to like speak with younger comics and really like share any advice he has or answer any questions he has, and he was probably the most influential, I would say. And what was crazy with him is I was a fan of his, and I followed him on social media and all that jazz. And I just randomly tweeted at him asking if he would want to go to a Louis C.K. show with me. And he said, sure. So I got 2 tickets and we went to see Louis C.K. at the Fox Theater here in Atlanta. And that was really like our first time like officially meeting in like a real sense.
Yeah.
But he was willing to do it. And it really went a long way and really showed he set the example for how comedians should treat each other and how I should treat other comedians and just be an open book and be welcoming. And I think part of what makes the Atlanta comedy scene so great and I mean, so thriving as well with Atlanta is like the next scene. Like people look at Atlanta for like the next upcoming talent. That's why I'm still here.
Right.
And I think a big part of it is just, it's like a community. You could hear like the old school stories of like backstabbing and the competitiveness and all that, but it really is, there's more of a camaraderie here in Atlanta that I think is really kind of the secret sauce behind what makes the scene so successful.
Yeah, it's always better to bring people up than to try to knock them down, and that's, you know, I see that a lot in my area, but I've been to other areas that I can tell is more the knock them down type situation. Right. Nashville was one of those. One club I did in Nashville was very much like that. The other club I went to was fantastic. So, you know, it kind of depends. Yeah.
It does depend. It totally depends.
Yeah. The folks that hang out there either are going to be behind you or totally against you. There's pretty two extremes there. That's the way it works.
Or indifferent, or a lot of the times the comedian, we can like tell ourselves the story that it's like, oh, they weren't overly welcoming, so they hate me, or they think I'm not funny, or like, I mean, everyone has bad days or whatnot as well. And some people, that's just their personality is that they are a little more introverted and not as outgoing and conversational. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a personal attack against us, because we can all see the flyers of all these comedians like on this show. And we're like, oh, there's a conspiracy against me and only me that is preventing me from getting booked on that show in the back of that bar at midnight on a Thursday, but it has cool font on the flyer, so I want to be on it. You know, it's like we can always tell ourselves those stories, but a lot of the time I've learned it's really just all self-imposed. Yeah,
it's self-imposed, and instead of getting bent out of shape about it, you should really look at that and say, okay, how do I make myself indispensable? And a lot of your guests have mentioned that you got to make yourself the one that they want, and then you'll be on all those flyers, and you'll have more work than you can shake a stick at.
And to focus on what you can control. So if you're wanting to get booked on more shows, but you're not currently getting booked, then just start booking your own show. Yeah, things like that. You know, kind of focus on what you're in control of and what you can create and the success you can kind of make happen for yourself. And that's the corner that I turned. It took me several years that I wish I had that mindset sooner in my career, where it is, well, instead of wasting energy on what everyone else is doing, what are you doing and how can you change that and what opportunities can you create? And that's really when I started to get a lot more positive momentum in here, when I stopped worrying about everyone else. Right.
That is so true. So you know, everything I've seen that you have done looks like you've made a pretty conscious decision to be a clean comic. You are at least 98% clean from everything I've seen.
98?
Yeah.
I didn't swear. What was dirty? Are you talking about my special?
Yeah. Well, your special. I watched some YouTube stuff. I mean, you're a pretty clean guy. I mean, you tackle some subjects that are a little bit harder. You know, you tackle racism and sexism and stuff like that. But you tackle them in a way that is non-confrontational, and you don't drop the F-bomb 100 times during your set. Is that something that you decided to do right from the beginning? Is that who you are? Or, you know, what is it that made you go that direction?
Yeah, that was actually a standard I set from the beginning. Is something I always, ever since I started, I wanted to be a clean comedian, just because I knew that would give me the opportunity to entertain more people. there's just the facts are, and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong between clean or dirty. Do what works for you and what is authentic to you, most importantly. And if you are dirty, there's just less work opportunities. That's just math. Okay. I want to be able to do the same jokes I do at a bar, that I do at a comedy club, that I do at a church, that I do at a college. And that way I could work the most and have the biggest fan base and entertain and help as many people as possible.
Right.
So starting out, that was just kind of the standard I had set for myself. And I would always put my material through that filter of would this work here or there? And even in thinking of making more universal material, like I started here in Atlanta. So there's rooms where it's all black people and there's rooms where it's all white people. And I actually, if a joke worked in one of those rooms and not the other, I would get rid of it because I knew it wasn't hitting that and it wasn't resonating that universal note. And I've just gotten so many more opportunities just because I am a clean comedian, just from even like event hosting and like, will you come perform at my birthday party? Or there's also moments where you don't know the show is supposed to be, quote, clean. And then you show up and they're like, okay, you're doing 30 minutes. And by the way, it's got to be clean.
Yeah.
And then if I was a dirty comedian, I would have been like, oh, I literally can't do this job.
Right.
Or I can't do it well enough to where they would want to have me back or refer me, which is where a lot of work comes from. So I would always, I heard Chris Rock say, if there was one thing he would have changed starting out, he would have been a clean comic, because he said if he was clean, he would have Ray Romano money.
Right.
So if someone like Chris Rock says that, there's a lot of validity to it. So I don't tell comics how they should do their comedy. I think it's your song, you sing it how you want. But for me personally, going clean was always the number one goal, and it's still become like my brand.
It's funny. I'm exactly the same way. And I tell people that, I cuss like a sailor at home, and even texting with my wife back and forth. It's a 4-letter word fest, but I decided in doing comedy that I was going to do clean. And I did like 2 sets where I was working a little blue, and it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like, I don't want to say it felt icky, but it just wasn't me, who I am on stage. And that's, you got to go with who you are.
For sure. And the audience can tell when you're faking it.
Yeah.
And like, if I'm at an open mic working out stuff, I'll throw stuff against the wall, or like I'll swear and like here and there and things like that. But like when it comes to, if I'm booked, I'm getting paid to be somewhere and I'm working, like, I'm performing clean comedy. But when you're working out new material, swear words will slip here and there and ideas will come to you. You'll just run with in the moment at an open mic. But if I'm getting paid, they're getting what they expect, which is a funny, clean show.
Right. Yeah. I respect that. That's, it's definitely harder to do. You don't know how much time, the F-bomb adds to your set until you take it out,
All those precious minutes, seconds we need as comedians.
Yeah. That's, if you draw it out, if you go, that's a couple, 3 seconds,
Then you call it back and you call it back. It becomes your tagline. You sell merch after the show.
Yeah. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you before we get into, I want to go to the podcast next, because I went totally batty over it, and that's all I've been listening to for the last couple weeks.
That's the whole goal, Scott.
Yeah, it's great. So everybody talks about what a comic should do when they first start out, and there's lots of stuff about the writing process and stuff like that. What are the top 3 things you would tell a comic that who has been doing it for 2 years and is getting pretty good and wants to take it to the next step?
So what is that next step?
I would say, okay, after 2 years, they're getting on some showcase shows. They've been able to feature a couple times, but not regular. And, they've traveled in maybe a 5 or 6 state area right around their own state. So
Wow.
like a region. So that's where they're at. And, what 3 things would you say to take it to the next level from that?
Is this they, Scott? Is this the they?
No.
No, okay. I didn't know if you were doing what I do on my podcast.
Yeah,
I'll do the same thing with my guest. If this hypothetical comedian did have this thing he had a question about.
Okay, I will say I will say it's 40% Scott, but
okay,
100% Scott is too old for that shit. So I'm probably not going to jump in and travel the country.
Yeah, I would first off say, really start your own show first. I think every comic should do their own show at least once, even if it's not a weekly show. If it was just like one showcase you tried to do, I think producing your own show gives you a lot of insight into the business side of comedy that will help you start to get booked more. So even at my show, I hosted a show here in Atlanta for like 7 years, and it went from like bi-weekly to then weekly. And I learned so much just from hosting and just you get that much more stage time when you host your own show also. So I think you kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone when you're producing a show. It's kind of like a crash course in the business side of comedy. And it's also a crash course in just getting that much more stage time, because it forces you to get out of your head of like, here's my material, here's my script. When you're hosting, you've got to be more in the moment. You got to be a little more reacting and more interactive, as opposed to like speaking at the audience. You have to be kind of with the audience, which is so important in stand-up. So I would say create your own show first. I think that's a good place to start. Second one, I would just say be nice. I mean, and that can be easier said than done, I guess, for some people. But starting out, I wasn't mean, but I wasn't receptive in terms of, I was always just to myself in my like set list. I was like going out to open mics a lot, but I wasn't being a part of the community, I guess you could say. And hosting a show actually helped me to get more integrated into my stand-up community. But starting out, I was more of just like, I'm an artist and I'm in my own head and I'm here just to do this. And then by the same token, I would then be complaining why I'm not getting booked on shows. Right. And it's because people don't even know that I want to do them. People don't even know who I am. You know, I'm just out at these open mics. So I would say start your own show, be nice, and really, even, I'm not saying go out there and be the life of the party, but if you see a comic at an open mic and you enjoy their set, go up to them. Say, hey, I liked that bit. How did you write that joke? Just some icebreaker. Tell a comic they're great and they'll love it. So that's a great icebreaker for anyone. And the third thing is live on stage. Stay on stage. I mean, I've interviewed over 200 comedians, and the number one piece of advice has been to live on stage. As soon as I heard Cedric the Entertainer closed out his interview on Hot Breath, that was his number one piece of advice to comics. You have to get on stage. So even at my level, 10 years in, I am not immune to the work. I still have to get on stage. When I go out to these open mics in Atlanta, I'm seeing the Rodney Perrys out there who are out on tour, who are filming movies and TV shows, but are still at those open mics at night. So if someone like them, 20, 30-year comedy veterans are still out and knowing they have to get on stage, there's no reason for any of us to not be out there. Right. So start your own show, be nice, and live on stage. Yeah,
I agree 100% with all 3 of those. The start your own show is really cool. I did a couple myself recently, and the nice thing is you get to set your own time. So you actually know how much material you have because
Right.
Because you may think you got a hot 20 or a hot 30, and it turns out you actually only got a hot 15, and you need to do some more work. So you can self-evaluate from that. The being nice part, I think a lot of comics are nice, but we are introverted by nature, a lot of us, and also we're consumed by the work we're doing. People don't understand how much work it takes to get that first 5 minutes, that first 10 minutes, and you are just immersed in your writing, and you're trying to get the timing right and all that kind of stuff. So when you're waiting to go up, you have to make an effort to be nice, and you have to make an effort to listen to the other comics so that you can give them those compliments. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that you're not living in your set so much, but you do have to know what's going on around you, and it's almost a deliberate thing that you have to do. You have to make yourself do it.
Yeah, and it's something I had to work at, in all honesty. But it is like, look at the comedy show as your workplace. So just being a good coworker will go a long way in getting more opportunities.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Hot Breath podcast, Joel.
Yeah.
That's my version of Hot Breath.
I love it.
So the podcast world is just absolutely nuts. I didn't know you had the Hot Breath podcast, so I'm looking at you to be a guest. And I'm like, oh, he's got a podcast. Oh, he's got well over 200 episodes. Oh, he interviewed Bobby Kelly, one of my favorite comics. I'm like, okay, let's start listening. And I think I shot you an email that I told you it was fire. And I should have, I should have said that your podcast is everything I want my podcast to be. So, congratulations on what you've done.
Wow, that means the world. Seriously, like I gotta say, listening to your first episode and how you were explaining your mission with Behind the Bits, I was like, wow, Scott and I are kindred spirits. Like how you were describing your podcast, and I was like, yeah, this is what I wanted my show to be, is like kind of inside the actor studio for comedians. And that's really kind of how I'll brand it to people when they ask me about Hot Breath, is it's like inside the actor studio for comedians. But I'm excited for you also, because first episode out of the gate, you get like your favorite comic, Tom Dreesen, on there. Yeah. So that's always a nice spark of kind of optimism when you're like, okay, this is possible. If I can do that, then what else is possible? So congratulations to you as well. Yeah,
that was a huge get. And fortunately, we had been talking before the podcast, and we're on a Facebook group together and stuff like that. And then I had seen him do a show, his Sinatra show. And so, I set it up well, and the fact that he actually said, yep, let's do it, and called me right on time, and stayed on the phone for longer than an hour, that I was just buzzing after that. I think you can tell during the whole thing, I was right at the beginning, I was just about to choke up because he's my guy, and I had to fight that off. So it was definitely the highlight of my podcast years so far.
And that's the example of, one, being nice, but also like I was talking about with Rodney Perry, of just, these guys are veterans. They don't need to do this, but they understand like the camaraderie within comedy, and they understand paying it forward and helping out younger comics. And that's what I've learned with doing Hot Breath is, a lot of the time, if you just ask, like, they're willing to do it. A lot of the things I've booked have come, a lot of the guests I've booked have come from being on like interacting with them on social media, or sending them a tweet. Or Bobby Kelly was a referral from Rich Voss. So I interviewed Rich Voss, who I connected with on social media, then went to see him. He was here at the Punchline in Atlanta. Went to see him live, and we talked after the show and kind of scheduled it that way. And then he referred me to Bobby Kelly, who Bobby Kelly referred me to Gary Goldman, who we have not gotten, but we talked. I mean, we interacted. I was actually booked out of town. I was in Birmingham, but I was willing to drive back to do it. But he was actually in town with his family, so he wasn't gonna have time anyway. But he said, definitely, like, I had I blitzed Gary Goldman.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I had Bobby Kelly, but then I had people, listeners who had Hot Breath shirts, wore Hot Breath shirts to his show at the Laughing Skull that weekend. It was like,
you're hitting him with subliminal and everything.
Oh,
yeah.
I went all in because Gary Goldman, he shares that spirit of, you know, with his writing tips he posts. Like, he really likes helping comics. So I knew and know that he's going to be like a guest that people are just going to like learn so much from.
Right.
So we're on his radar. We're on a lot of people's radar. We're about 1 degree from a lot of cool things right now.
And the thing with the podcast is you just got to keep pushing it and put out the quality content, and then you get the buzz, and it's you know, I'm 10 episodes in, so I'm still learning on how to do one that goes out nationally, but I did a local one for about 5 years, and it grew exponentially after people started talking about it. So, you know, I know that'll happen with this one too, and I'm just waiting for it to happen. And the nice thing about this type of podcast and your type of podcast, the Hot Breath podcast, is it's timeless. You're not interviewing people about what they're doing right now, or if you are, it's just a couple minutes of the podcast. The rest of it is, what's the industry like? What's writing like? What's your life like? And all that stuff is really timeless. And the tips that you put out, you know, it doesn't matter when you listen to it. It's good.
Wow. I appreciate that, Scott. And that's really become the goal. Is it's like an educational resource for comedians. More, I learn just as much as the listeners are learning as well. And we're kind of all in on this together at this point. And the community, like we got Cedric the Entertainer, because like I heard he was going to be in town. So I photoshopped my face on a photo with him, and then had people tag him on social media. And then his opener said he could connect us. And it's just, the more, it's interesting you talk about people talking about your show, and that's how it'll grow. Like, the more I've really doubled down on building a community around the show, with the Hot Breathiverse is what we call it as well. The more I've doubled down on the community piece of it, that's how we've been able to like grow and really start to get international with, like, I mean, we're on every continent now except Antarctica. So I have listeners that reach out almost daily about an episode they heard. And my favorite is to hear, like you said, where you go back in the catalog. I've heard people say they got pulled in by Mark Normand, and then they listened to like 20 other episodes. Right. That's really just that, it makes all the work worth it. 'Cause, you know, podcasting is a full-time job. So it's good when it pays off, you know?
Nobody knows what work goes behind the fun stuff of talking to people.
Oh my gosh. And that's, I mean, I've calculated over like 15 hours for a single episode. Yeah. So that's an hour-long episode. So it's a labor of love, but I mean, it's the show as a comedian that I wish existed when I started out. So now I'm hearing that kind of echoed back from listeners, like, oh, this is the show this is what I needed right now, or I'll be out at a show and tell another comic about this episode, or I heard a comic talking about your show. It's we're all in it together, which is important, I think.
Well, I hope you don't mind that I'm watching you very closely and copying your playbooks.
Please.
It's going to be the way I go. I'm going to create a community. It's the way it's going to be.
It is, yeah. We created a like a private Facebook group. Listeners are in there that are connecting with each other from around the world. So I would totally recommend doing that with your show. It's a great kind of just town square for listeners to really connect and interact and ask questions and learn from each other as well. Right. And yeah, a lot of it was learning the hard way with mine. So I'm hoping you don't even have to. Yours has a clear and specific focus. Mine, over 4 years, it's kind of meandered around what the voice is and the exact mission. But as soon as I found it's inside the actor studio for comedians, then I really started doubling down on just the educational piece. But for a while, I would kind of be like, well, is it all comedy, or should I do like a season where it's just social media comedy, or is we're in Atlanta, maybe it's about Atlanta creatives and not just comedy. And it kind of had to come full circle back to comedy. And then, now it's we're dialed in now. So you're already ahead of the game and just knowing what your show is and what the identity of it is. So you're years ahead of where I was when I started out.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I'm looking at your episodes here. The last one you put out is 3 Steps to Finding Your Voice. The nice thing about this is that episode is like 12 minutes long, and it packs so much information in there. And the thing that I got that was it was a revelation to me. You said, being more personal with your comedy and bringing your personal life into it, because that's the stuff that nobody can copy. Nobody else is going to do it because it's you. And that really hit home with me, because I've done both sides of the fence. And when I do personal stuff, first off, I remember it because it's me.
Yeah.
And second off, it resonates better with the audience, because I'm a big dork, and people just love big dorks. So, that really resonated with me, and it just affirmed the direction I was already going. And I just think it's so cool. You can go through your episodes, and you've got the longer episodes where you're doing an interview, an hour or more, but you've got a lot of them that are just tips and tricks. And you did one a couple weeks ago. Get your writing going, make sure you write every day and stuff like that. So it's really cool, and that you can listen to the podcast and you can get all the great information from some of the best comics out there. And then also you will pop in and say, hey, by the way, you're a comic, don't forget to do this.
Exactly. Yeah. And those shorter episodes are getting a lot of great feedback. So I'm going to do those more and start incorporating those into also our YouTube channel moving forward. I was just at Podfest in Orlando this past weekend and learned a lot about the YouTube space and the opportunity within having a podcast on there. And I've been on YouTube since last year doing video, but there's so much more that can be done on YouTube that I think people are overlooking, that they just think it's just like a place to watch videos, but it's actually the most powerful social media platform in the world. So with the biggest potential audience. So we're really going to double down on that and start creating more of that micro, just bite-sized educational content that kind of gets people in and out. Quick tip here. Now you can go work on it for the week or whatnot.
Right. The thing about YouTube is you don't get any distraction, because if you're messing around Facebook or Twitter or whatever, you're going to see a tweet or something that catches your eye. But if you're watching, a 5 or 10 minute video, then you're probably going to watch it all the way through. So you get the audience attention that way.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's the second largest search engine on the internet. So behind Google, it's the largest search engine. So people are on there just Googling, how do you write a joke?
Yeah.
Or how do you get booked on a show?
Yeah.
It's people use it just like Google. So there's great ways to help people on there as well.
Yeah. I definitely used it to change my wife's headlamp on the Mazda when she had it, because it turned out it was
I've done that
harder
too.
than I expected.
I've done that too, for sure. I hate some of the tutorials where it's like a 12-year-old kid who's like, here's how you do it, idiots. And then he's like, oh my gosh, this kid has 1 million followers on here,
Yeah. So once again, folks, if you're going to listen to 2 podcasts, it's mine and Joel Byars' Hot Breath podcast. Hot Breath.
Love
That's
it.
great. So you actually did a podcast about putting together your special, The Trophy Husband. But I wanted to, and everybody should go listen to that. First of all, The Trophy Husband, I think I told you before we started, I've listened to about 2/3 of it because I'm reading 2 books, trying to catch up on your podcasts and everything else. But I'm going to listen to the rest of it tonight probably. And I just think it's hilarious. It's very cool what you put together. Very homegrown, and yet accessible to everyone. I think it's great. I was just blown away by how warm the audience was to you, and it was just really neat. So obviously you have been, I've heard through the podcast and stuff. You've been in a TV pilot, and you've been trying to get into the Hollywood type thing and trying to get your special done, and it wasn't happening, so you did it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
what's all that about? What do you have to do to make your own special?
Well, it's and I was worried. I don't know if you listened to it or watched it, but did you watch it as well, or were you just listening to it more?
I got to tell you, I had it on my phone. I downloaded it to my phone, and
Oh, cool.
the video was up while I was driving, and I was probably looking at the picture too much.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I didn't know because I remembered I put the audio on the Patreon, but I wasn't sure if you had gotten the special or you joined the Patreon. So yeah, it's my whole goal with the special was of like we talked about kind of earlier in starting to create your own success and just not waiting on other people to validate you. So me releasing a special completely independently was my attempt and maybe my rally cry to other comics to stop waiting and start creating their own opportunities. And whatever that is for a comedian, 10 years in, I wanted to do my own special. So 2 years in, your rally cry may be, oh, I want to start my own show, or I want to release a 20-minute album, or it's just to start doing something that gets you out of your comfort zone. So I knew a stand-up special for me, 10 years into comedy, I thought it would be a good like time capsule of where I've come in comedy up to this point and where my comedy is at 10 years. And it'll be a nice kind of nostalgic piece to look back on as my career continues to grow and evolve. But it really is. It started out as I was going to record an album, and then I did a fan of the podcast. I actually did his podcast, and we were talking about the album. And then he told me he actually has a production company, and we could just film and make this a special. So it all just kind of happened to where I was going to do an album, and then I was like, oh, sounds like I'm doing a special now. It was kind of like with my comedy writing book. I teach an 8-week comedy class. And one of my students who was a professor was like, this is a book. He's like, this class is a book. And I was like, is it? And he's like, yeah. And then he had like a whole outline of what the book could be based on the lessons. And I was like, oh, I guess we're writing a book now. So it's just kind of one of those things, and why I wanted to inspire comics to just start, because starting is the hardest part. And then the pieces will start to fall in to place that way. So me saying I want to record an album in 2019 then evolved over time into it becoming a comedy special. But I would have never have known that if I didn't set the intention first. So it's a lot of moving parts. I mean, you got to find a venue. You got to make sure you sell it out. You got to figure out what the production side of it is in terms of how many cameras do you want? What is your budget? All the way to, we actually did a unique thing where he followed me around for a few weeks leading up to the taping of the special as well. And he was filmed me at open mics, filmed me at comedy clubs, preparing my set and talking about it. And it's a vlog that we're slowly rolling out on my Joel Byars comedy. There's 3 episodes of the vlog up right now, but it really tracks the evolution of this story I have about crying at my wedding. And the vlog really documents just like where it started to where in the special you see it end up, where it starts out as a clunky idea at an open mic that ends in applause break on the comedy special. So just another thing I wish existed. When I was looking at comedy specials, I was like, well, what's a unique spin on this? And part of it was, well, let's have a vlog about the creative process behind the comedy special. And also there's fun things like my dog's in the audience at the comedy special. My wife's on the front row as well. The guy who was hosting it was a comic I started with back in the day, who's since gone on to be on like Wild and Out, and he's written on a bunch of TV shows and stuff. So it all just was right place, right time, but also like preparation of everything over 10 years coming together to really end in a comedy special I'm super proud of. And I think it's a unique take on the format that I'm hoping other comics will see and get inspired to then redefine the format again.
I just thought it was great, and it looked like that was that a 2 or 3 camera shoot?
We had 4 technically. There was a camera on stage as well that actually ended up dying halfway through. So we had a camera. We had like a diamond set up. So we had like a camera in the way back where that was like the full wide shot.
Right.
And then to stage right, we had a stationary camera that was about three-quarter shot. And then on the stage left, the director, Isaac, was he had a handheld, and he was kind of more doing close-ups and some more like texture, kind of more feel of we wanted to get that authentic grit of stand-up. So he was capturing those shots more. And then we had like a little handheld camera on the stage that was getting kind of like me in front of the audience that, I left. There's a moment I knocked the camera over and I go to set it back up. There's a false start in the special as well, where we didn't have we did it all in one take. We didn't do 4 shows like you hear like all these comics on Netflix doing. We did it all in one take, one go. So, there was a false start where the lighting wasn't right and we had to reset. So I go out there and then I'm like, oh, wait, we need to reset this. So I leave it all in. I forget my material at one moment, but I leave it all in because I wanted this to really kind of illustrate the real side of comedy that a lot of people don't get to see, that us as comics, we know, but that's why it's kind of for comics by comics. Cause my goal is for really comics to see it and be inspired to take the special to another level.
I was glad you left the false start in there and some of the little bloops along the way. It made it more human. Some of the ones you watch on Netflix, you're like, wow, I mean, they could have been in a box doing this and they could have faked the audience. So, it was really cool the way you did it. I really enjoyed that.
That was our whole goal with it was to really showcase like the raw, authentic side to comedy and just showing stand up now with the specials, it can become so like overly polished, or it's almost like too perfect. It's like unattainable. I wanted comics to watch the special and feel inspired that, oh, I can do that.
Just kind of an aside question, the bits that you did for that special, how many of those, came up in like your first years, or did you bring anything with you from when you first started?
There's a one-liner that is still one of my favorite jokes that is definitely in there, where it's like, I married a woman with a tattoo because she's comfortable with permanent mistakes.
Yep.
I love that joke. I started out in comedy doing one-liners. I think one-liners are like the foundation of comedy. And I think if you get a good grasp on one-liners, then you can start to expand them into like bits and stories. But I started with one-liners, and that's just one I came up with one day, and it just always stuck in it. I always got a big laugh. And even the joke I close with on the special, which I won't spoiler alert. I know you haven't seen it, but it's, and I don't want to spoil it for people, but it's actually a joke my wife told me not to do. So I decided to close my special with it. And that was a joke I had developed over the years that you'll hear in the special. Like the writing is very specific and meticulous, and it's there's more of like a melody to it. Like there's a clear rhythm to it. It's not a song, but there's a rhythm and a melody to the word choice and the words that it took time and trial and error to really kind of hammer down that puzzle. But some of the bits are newer, some of them are older. What I did find with putting it together and trying to figure out the storyline of the special was how to weave it all in to seem like one seamless conversation or one seamless story arc. But it's actually a bunch of individual bits I kind of had to like rearrange and rework and figure out, because it's called The Trophy Husband. So I had a lot of material around my personal life and seemingly unconnected, but through time I was able to kind of tether them all together in like one sequence. But it was a lot of work making a lot of these individual jokes kind of carved into really a complete special.
Right. I can definitely identify with finding stuff that you did at the beginning and seeing a place for it down the line, because just in my short time, I've gone back and saw things that I wrote when I first started, and I'm like, well, I did that once and then I put it away, and if I polish this up and work a little bit, it can go really well with the the 10 minutes I'm doing. And never say never on some of the stuff that you've written, because it may come around to be good.
For sure. And that could be in 2 months, that could be in 2 years, where all of a sudden a joke that never worked is now the missing piece to this bigger bit you have. Yeah. Comedy's so bizarre like that. But it really is. If a joke isn't working, sometimes it's just not time for it too. So you just kind of shelf it, let it ferment, let it tumble around the subconscious for a while. And I've found you'll eventually find a place for it.
Yeah. From start to finish, how long did it take to get the Trophy Husband to where you could actually put it out there for people?
I mean, it's really 10 years of work into one special. I probably started trying to organize it and everything, maybe 2 months, maybe, or 3 months. I'm not sure when I actually started of like, okay, I have a special coming up. I need to start working the actual set, because I thought what's funny is for most of the year, I thought that was going to be the easy part, where I was like, oh, I've been doing comedy for 10 years. I have all these funny jokes. It'll be fine. And so I worked on all the other logistics of like, where's it going to be? How are we going to promote it? What are the cameras set up? What are the cameras going to, like, just worrying about all the logistical side of the special. So then it probably came down, I would say, the final 2 or I don't know, 3 months, maybe 2 months of me like, oh, I have a special coming up and I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be about. I know I have a lot of material to do, but it's like, how will it become like a storyline? So I would say, I mean, it took me a couple months of intentional repetition out on stage and on the road to really start to figure out where to start, where to end with it.
Yeah. Yeah, you did a good job with it. The stuff with your grandpa is just hilarious.
No, thank you. Some of my family was there. They loved that.
Yeah. You hit that one when I was driving, and I swerved a little bit on that because I was spitting out my Diet Pepsi. So
I'm glad that resonated with you. That's good, and that's that personal, like you were talking about earlier, like the personal material. What is a joke I could do? Like, everyone has a grandpa, but how can I do a grandpa joke that no one else can do? Well, make it about my grandpa and something that actually happened with him. Same thing with my marriage. Everyone who's married probably has marriage material, but how can I make mine unique and different? And that is talking specifically about my point of views and my experiences within marriage is what's going to make it me, and not like just some hacky marriage joke we've all heard.
Right. I think it's funny you did the joke that your wife didn't want you to do. I did one once, and my wife's in the audience quite a bit because I'm mostly doing local stuff, and I didn't tell her about it, and I did it, and on the way home she's like, "Yeah, you're not going to do that one again."
No.
So it's still in my book, but yeah, I haven't done it since she said no.
And that came down in like crunch time, where my wife rarely comes to, she doesn't come to my shows that much because she has a life or whatever. But that's why it was so important. We had her front row on the comedy special. We get her a little camera time. You'll see in the special. But I was actually at a music open mic. We were there. It was a local music open mic. You know, we like to go to events together and spend quality time. And they let like comedians sign up for it also. And I was like, oh, cool. Maybe we'll come back next week and I'll do comedy here. So I signed up for next week. And then I was kind of like, I'll still bounce ideas off of her, knowing she's not going to laugh or it's not going to matter. But I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to go try this one. I'm going to go do that one. I think this crowd will really like it. And she's like, don't do that. It's like, don't do that. She's like, it's not going to work. So then that's what inspired me to be like, not only am I going to do it, I'm going to close my comedy special with it, and it is going to work. So that was a week away from the special, where I was just looking for stage time anywhere I could. So music open mic was stage time. And that kind of is a week out from filming. I was like, oh, I finally have my closer. So up until, even the night before taping, I was out on the road the night before on stage working out the set, fine tuning it. So it was up until the final hour. And even the day of the special, we did like a rehearsal where we got there earlier. We set up the cameras, worked through the shots we want to do. And I just did a dry rehearsal in front of an empty theater, just going over the set word for word as if I were performing it. I wasn't wearing my suit yet, but that is the suit from my wedding. I wore the suit I wore in my wedding at the special too.
Oh, that's great. You look good.
It all ties in. There's so many little Easter eggs like that in there.
Yeah, that's really cool. You mentioned something that I don't want to pass up. Music open mics. So in my area, we've got like one open mic a week, and that's over at the Drop where you performed. And if you want to do other open mics, you got to go at least an hour and a half to do other open mics. And I always tell comics that a music open mic is really cool. A, you get more time. They usually give you between 10 and 15 minutes. B, they're not expecting comedy. And C, you really know if your stuff works or not, because if you can catch the attention of at least a third of the bar, then your stuff is hitting. So I always, just to get stage time, if an open mic will allow a comic, I will always do it.
Oh, music, poetry open mics. Yeah, I mean, wherever there's a stage and sometimes not even a microphone, I'll be there.
Yeah. It's really cool to do that. So you've been married for 2 years?
Almost 3 years. April 1st will be 3 years.
So what does your wife think about your chosen profession and all the traveling and stuff?
Oh, she loves it. I mean, in terms of, she's supportive of me, and she, quote, gets it. And she understands that I do have to be out, and I'm gone more than maybe a typical relationship in those terms. But she knew that before she signed up for it. Like I was sure to let her know before, like, she moved down here, we moved in together, that this is my life, this is my job, these are my hours, and they just can't change, that. But what I'm mindful of also is I'm always trying to find ways to like squeeze in time with her. So if she is able to travel with me, or she feels like traveling with me on a weekend gig, I'm happy to do it. Just at Podfest this weekend, I took her with me as well. But if I'm going to be gone during the weekend, I'll usually stay in during the weeks more, like during the weekdays more. Or if I'm going to be home on the weekends, if I'm not booked, then I will be out more during the week. So I am more mindful of the balance.
Right.
And finding ways and being mindful about how I allocate my time. But she understands, and I mean, she's supportive and knows the long-term vision, and understands that this is all part of the process. And I don't think without a supportive spouse, I wouldn't be where I am, for sure. I wouldn't be thinking as big as I am, and looking for the opportunities I'm looking for, and just the work I'm doing is really inspired by her.
Right. That's really good. I'm happy for you. So I've been with my wife for 37 years, and we have grown children now, and I told you my son's in Huntsville and my daughter's out in the DC area. So I mean, we are true empty nesters, and I was very happy about how supportive she is of what I'm doing. She actually pushes me to go out. She's like, don't keep it just in South Bend. Go where you need to go, and I'll go with you so you can have a few beers, and
that's great.
We'll both lose sleep together. So it's
oh, that's great. You need that.
Yeah, so it's been really, really good for me that she sees something in me, and that she wants me to push it a little bit more than I even thought I was going to push it. So it's great to have that support and have somebody nice to go home to. That's always nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to circle back to Hot Breath a little bit. You have had some big name players on the podcast, and I know that you hit some of them cold, that you just hit them on social media and stuff like that. So I've got two questions. How would you recommend that I approach guests for my podcast? Because there's a few that I'm kind of working on, and second, on the, I want you to rate what it's like doing a podcast via Skype versus doing a podcast in person.
Yeah. Oh, well, via Skype, you can see my dog just puked. Oh my God. As you're asking that question, I just see him starting to do that. And I'm like, oh, yeah. No. Oh, here he goes
there
again.
He goes again.
Oh, buddy. Oh, man.
On the bed, not the couch.
Oh, I think it's on the couch now. There we go. You all right, Kenneth? All right. Oops. So that's a perk of doing it via Skype.
Yeah.
But I always, one, you asked about booking guests. I mean, I think just reaching out to them, whether it is social media or it is via their website or even management. I've gone through management sometimes as well. A lot of the comedians will have their management info on their website that you can reach out to and book that way. So there's just reaching out. You just never know. But having kind of your ducks in a row in terms of like having a press kit, having a vision for why you want them on the show or what is the show, since yours is, we have a similar thing. So a lot of comics like to help other comics. So I also would research guests before reaching out to them. So I would have a point of reference in terms of maybe there's a something I can mention in the pitch that I would only be able to know if I knew them as a person, so that can help to kind of personalize the pitch. A lot of the times too, you can time it out with something they're releasing. If they have a special coming out or they're releasing a book or they have a TV show coming out, you can release it around that schedule as well. So you pitch it more as a platform for them to promote their project, as opposed to them, hey, let me have your time and come on here. It's more like what is in it for them. So really give thought to like why they would want to come on the show to begin with. So that's a good homework to do before you even reach out to someone.
This will be the first interview I've done where I actually took notes.
Oh, fancy! Take that, Tom Dreesen.
Yeah. Now I had notes going into it, but I'm taking notes now. So yeah.
Yeah, you inspired me. I need to reach out to Tom Dreesen. But that is the power of Skype as well, is that you could just do the interview, whenever, like it's convenient for them and not having to travel. You're not confined to doing it in person. So all of mine have been, there were a few early ones I did over the phone, but I always like doing them in person just because it's more of like an intimate, personalized experience. And you like meet the person and there's just, I don't know. I've kind of created the show with that format. So I'm kind of I've had opportunities to do phone interviews that I've waited that then turned into like in-person interviews down the road. So I'm willing to wait for the in-person interview, but I mean, at a certain point, there's also like, what's the reason? Like, if you're still getting the interview, you know, if I wanted to interview Tom Dreesen, do I fly to go see him, or do I just hop on Skype and do it? Right. You know?
Yeah.
So you've got me. I just posted, because I'll do like Skype coaching calls with comedians where I'll help them with writing or give them answer their questions and things like that. And I just posted one of those on the podcast that I did via Skype. And it's been getting a lot of listens and a lot of feedback. And I'm like, well, do people even care if it's in person? Should I start going the Skype route as well and really start reaching out to more comics that way?
That episode is fantastic, by the way. I don't want to interrupt you, but the episode where you do the Skype session with Micah, just absolutely fantastic. And I was just blown away by the fact that, you know, she didn't bring a whole lot to the table. She, you know, and I'm not dissing her. That's what comics do. When they want to start out, they don't bring a lot to the table. You were able to draw out probably 4 or 5 good premises, within an hour's time that she could take and not only do a decent 5 minutes with, but they all connect to each other. I mean, you got the pet rat, you got the airplane, you got the kids. I mean, it's just, it was watching that unfold, because when I first started listening to it, I'm like, you know, I don't need to listen to this because I know what open micing is like and stuff like that. But then I kept listening. I'm like, holy cow, you really know how to draw stuff out. And you asked the right questions.
What made you keep listening and not just turn it off?
It was, I don't want to blow up your self-esteem, but it was really you. The way you talked to Micah and were able to draw out the fact that she had a pet rat, the fact that the rat had its own room, where she got the rat, the fact that she's had multiple rats, you know, just all, through all that conversation, none of that came through in the first couple minutes you talked. You drew it out, and I was really compelled to listen just to see what more you were going to draw out and how she would receive it, and everything just worked out. I was just and I listened right to the very last minute. I was like I said, I don't want to blow your self-esteem up, but I was impressed.
No, I appreciate it, Scott. That's definitely. I've done a lot of those Skype sessions, and a lot of times people are coming to the table with an idea or nothing, or some people have never even done stand-up, and they're like, I just want to know. Some people will just do a Skype session just to ask questions, you know, and there's another great podcast, a guy you would probably like to interview. His name's Rick Roberts.
Okay.
He does a School of Laughs podcast. Okay. And he shares in our similar mission of like educating comics and his perspective. What's interesting is we're kind of all coming at the topic from a different perspective in terms of he's like an older comic, almost on speaking about his experience and interviewing from the experience of doing this like 30 years. I'm like a comedian doing it in the middle of the hustle, right? Just in the thick of it. And then you're a comic coming at it from like new. Yeah. So it's he would be a good guy to connect with, and he does Skype sessions, and I was at a crossroads in my career, and I paid for his time. You know, I paid to do a Skype session with him, and leaving that session, I had a clarity on what my next step was in my career. So it really does, like, it's worth, just like I was inspiring comics to invest in themselves with this special, because this was paid by me. Like all this was me done independently, released independently. So I'm willing to invest in myself if I know there's going to be like a value at the other end of it. So I've seen a lot of people invest in just an hour-long Skype session that has really changed the direction of their comedy.
Right. I really value more after that episode. I value more the one-on-one conversation. outside of a comedy club, really outside of a writer's workshop, where you guys are dedicated and you're paying attention to each other and you're really connecting so that you can find the funny, find out what it takes to get those bits worked out and even started. So that was a very compelling episode for me. It was really good.
I really appreciate you saying that, because this is the first time I've done one and asked if they're cool if I record it and post it on the podcast, because I was seeing so many comics benefit from it, and I was like, man, I think comedians could really learn a lot just from being a fly on the wall on one of these sessions. And it was, again, something I wish existed when I started out. But a lot of people, there is that debate with, can you teach comedy or not? And I mean, coming from someone who has taught classes, I do more workshops now on one-on-one stuff because I'm just on the road so much. I can't really commit to an 8-week class, but I could say there are tools and there are tricks and there are structures within comedy, but anyone can learn to play guitar, understanding the notes and the chords. But I mean, there's only one Jimi Hendrix. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm not going to say you're going to become Dave Chappelle, but there are notes and chords within comedy that is true with whoever you are, that the more you can understand those, then the easier it will be to kind of find your own voice and way.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like I said. If you are a comic, the Hot Breath podcast is just a must listen. It's the one, and then Behind the Bits, it's getting there. It's going to be the one. It's there
too, Scott. Hey man, it's a process.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 10 in, I'm over 200 in, so it's just a numbers game. It's just keep pumping them out.
Yeah, no doubt. Final question. Who's your dream guest? Who do you want to have on that you don't know if you can get, but you're still going to go after him?
Steve Martin.
All right.
Steve Martin was my favorite. He's one of my favorite comics, and I just like the versatility of everything he's done, from stand-up to writing to even music. He's like a virtuoso on the banjo. He really is one of those polymaths who can just do anything at a high level. So he's definitely my number one, Steve Martin. And there are others, Kevin Hart would be great. Sinbad is another comic. And we're 1 degree from so many people, but it is just remaining patient. And what I've found through especially recently with the podcast is that it's more information driven than guest driven. So I've really taken a step back on who's the next big guest, but it's more what is the next best piece of content I can share with the audience. So what does the audience want and how can I help them get it? So I'm really, of course I'm still aiming for big guests, but that was my only focus. And I thought the guest is what drove the podcast, but it's actually the information that's driving it. So
exactly. Yeah.
Because there's lesser known comics, but their episode is really really informative, and they have way more listens than a quote famous comic.
Right.
So it's really all information driven.
Yeah, I would, just in the few I've done, my Stuart Huff episode is the one that I've gone back and listened to several times, just because the stuff he said. I mean, he is the anti-fame comic. He doesn't want to be
Incredible.
famous. He just wants to do what he wants to do. But his stuff, his episode was just out of this world for me. So, and that was my second episode. So that was great.
I know Tom Dreesen and Stuart Huff. I was like, geez, I got a tough act to follow here. Yeah, Stuart's great too. Yeah, I want to get him on Hot Breath also.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll do it. It took me about a minute to get him on, so he's like, "Yep, sure, I'll do it."
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just one of those old school comics. He just likes helping other comics. I just love those people.
It's amazing how many people have said that he's made a big impact on their life. A lot of the comics I talk to, and
for sure,
like you, he's a giving person. He wants people to succeed, and that helps.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You're gonna make me cry, Scott.
Don't cry, man.
This isn't your wedding. Don't cry.
Yeah, don't cry. So, Joel, how can people find you?
My website is joelbyarscomedy.com, JoelByars.com. And that's where you can find my schedule. But most importantly, that's where you can find my comedy special, The Trophy Husband. It's at joelbyarscomedy.com. You can also find my podcast on all podcast platforms. Anywhere you listen to a podcast, Hot Breath is on. And we're also on YouTube as well, which has been a fun endeavor. We actually just had a Felipe Esparza clip, like eclipse almost 400,000 views on there. So it's all a Hot Breath podcast and joelbyarscomedy.com.
Great. And I do know that I've been on your website, and you can get to just about everything that you're involved in right from there, and that's great.
Yeah, and I do have a comedy writing book as well. We referenced it with one of my students told me to make my comedy class a book. So that's called The Comics Playbook. And if you're interested, go to comicsplaybook.com and you can order it there. Or you can order it directly from me as well if you hit me up on the website or all my social medias, Joel Byars Comedy and at Hot Breath Pod. So just search my name and you can find a way to connect with me. And I would love to hear from any of your listeners out there. That's my favorite thing with Hot Breath is when I have a guest and then the guest reaches back out to me and is like, whoa, I had like 10 people reach out to me about my episode on Hot Breath. Like that's my favorite. It's my favorite thing when the listeners really get out in the streets and start spreading the Hot Breathiverse, as I call it.
Oh, I love that tag. That's a great tag.
Thank you.
Well, Joel, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I feel like I've learned a lot. Like I said, I took notes. I've got notes here that I have to transfer into my notebook and put a couple of them on the whiteboard and all that kind of good stuff. Obviously, you're doing great work, and I wish you all the luck in the world. And I really appreciate what you do.
I appreciate you, Scott. Keep up the great work.
All right. Thanks, Joel.
Woo.
Get ready because Scott's is taking over daylight saving time. It's such a big event that we're calling it Day-Long Saving Time. And now it's got real savings. In fact, it's the biggest deals of the year. Audacious? Absolutely. So don't wait. Stock up early and you'll be able to save up to $20 on Scott's Triple Action and Easy Seed products today at the Home Depot and Lowe's. Offers available March 9th through 22nd at select U.S. stores while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See store for exact offers.
With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One NA, member FDIC.